guys, I am really excited to teach you how to make sourdough today, sourdough bread. I've been making sourdough bread for about 4 years and I just love it because it's super delicious and it's fresh. It's not full of preservatives like the stuff I buy at the that you buy at the store. Of course, I also buy bread at the store because I don't always make this. But my kids love it. It makes for some great avocado toast, which I super duper love. So yeah, so the difference between sourdough bread and regular bread is that regular bread is leavened with yeast, just that you buy or that's manufactured. I'm actually not sure how they make yeast, whereas sourdough bread is leavened with yeast from the environment. And so with regular bread, it rises like in an hour or two, and so the rising process is very quick. And with sourdough, the process of rising is more like 24 hours, and so it's a slower rise, which supposedly basically breaks down the gluten a little bit better, it breaks down the sugar a little bit better, and that makes it healthier. It's also just like literally 3 ingredients: flour, water, and salt, and that's it. So leavening is where the bread sort of becomes fluffy. So without yeast or without a sourdough starter, which is the sourdough's version of yeast, it basically, bread would be like a rock. And so what makes it fluffy and have little bubbles, and that's the leavening process, which is where it's basically where air gets trapped between the dough and it just makes little air bubbles. And then, yeah, that just is what makes the bread light and fluffy. Okay, so the first thing you need to make sourdough is a sourdough starter. This is my sourdough starter. I created it myself, and I can link instructions on how to do this. But an easy hack is some places sell dried sourdough starters, and I've actually used that in the past and it worked great. And you can just buy it in a little packet, and maybe you have to cultivate it for a few days, but it works really well. So I'll leave a link to one that I've used in the past in the description of the video, so you can check it out. You can also sometimes go to bakeries and ask them to share their starter with you. They consider it like a good luck thing or a goodwill thing that to share this, and so many of them are more than happy to. Or if you see someone at the farmer's market who sells sourdough bread, they will often share their sourdough with you, or their starter with you, just like a little bit of it if you ask them. So the starter just kind of smells a little bit sour, and I basically I keep it in my fridge, and then when I'm ready to make bread, I take it out and feed it. And so if I don't make bread for like a couple of months, I still need to take it out and feed it. But I mean, it really lasts just a really long time in the fridge. So that's really nice. And I will tell you what feeding it means, because that sounds like a scary monster, which it kind of is. It's kind of crazy, but that's what we're gonna do right now. So you start off the day, you wake up in the morning and you feed the sourdough starter. And the way to do that is you need a scale. I have an OXO or OXO. I don't really know how to pronounce it, but I'll put a link to that in the video description as well. And then I like to use these Weck jars. I can put a link to those as well. I just think they're a good size. It gives the starter space to rise, and I just think they're cute, and I use them all over my kitchen. And then I also use this. I'll put a link to it too, but it's just good for scraping the starter and the dough because it's really sticky. Okay, so my starter is in this jar, and so I'll take off the lid, and this is an empty jar. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna weigh the empty jar so I can see how much the starter in here weighs, because we need to know the weight of it. And so I always just use grams because they're so much easier to understand than ounces. They're just so much easier to work with. All right, so, okay, so this is basically, so then I zero it out, okay? And so it will basically minus the weight of this jar when I weigh this, because it's the same jar, so they're the same weight. Okay, so this sourdough starter is 100 grams. So the way to feed the starter is you have to have equal parts water, flour, and starter. So since this is 100 grams, that means I need to add 100 grams of water and I need to add 100 grams of flour. And I will also note this down in the description as well. So yeah, don't worry about memorizing it all. Okay, so I will start with the flour. So I zero this out so that I can measure the flour exactly. I have one of these big tubs of flour down here. So I'm just gonna put it in here slowly, and I'm measuring while I do it so I don't overdo it. I just like using weight so much more in baking than I do using measuring cups, because I can never find my measuring cups and they're never clean, or they're wet when I need to use it for something dry. And so just weighing makes everything easier. I feel like some people feel like weighing is overly specific, but it's not, I don't do it to be overly specific or overly scientific. It's actually just easier, less dishes. Okay, we're almost there. Okay, good. All right, we have 100 grams of flour and 100 grams of starter. And now I'm gonna zero that out and I'm gonna add 100 grams of water. The water goes fast, so I just like to put it in something that's like easy to pour with. Okay, there we have it. That is the water. And 100 grams of each. So this is a total, this new starter is gonna be 300 grams. So I use this to just scrape the edges and get it all mixed up. Kind of will look like, I don't know, like cottage cheese. I try to get as many lumps out of it as I possibly can. Kind of smells like bread and yogurt mixed together. I actually like to scrape the sides of the jar clean that are more up here so that when it's rising, I can see how much it's risen. Okay. Here's how it looks. It's just kind of gloopy and watery. Just clean the edges a little bit. Okay. So then I put the top on, and I don't put like a top that seals it tightly. I just put something that's loose, because this is gonna grow. It's gonna at least double. And so I just don't want to trap the gas in there and then the container breaks. So it's just a top with no clamps. And I will come back. I usually, once I feed it, I come back at about lunchtime and I see how it's doing. Hey guys, okay, so it is around lunchtime and we've let the starter grow for a little bit. And here you can see, if you look close, you can see all of the little bubbles that are in there. And so it's just eating the food we gave it, and it's getting bigger and bigger. It's just about doubled in size. You can see on the top, there's a few little bubbles. So now we're actually gonna feed it again. So in the sourdough recipe we're gonna use, it uses about 200 grams of the starter. So we are going to take, so basically you wind up throwing away some starter every time you make bread. All right, so let me do a little bit of math in my head. All right, so I'm gonna take about 75 grams of this starter and put it in here. Actually, I'm gonna take 100 grams of this starter and put it in here, and then we'll do 100 grams of flour and 100 grams of water, because that will give us 200 grams of starter to use for the recipe, and then it will give me 100 grams to put back in the fridge. All right, so I'm gonna zero this out, and I just pick this up like that and pour that sludge in there. And we're doing 100 grams. Okay, we got it. All right, so actually, I throw the rest of this away. Now there are many recipes that you can have sourdough starter discard pancakes, all sorts of things, but I'm not going to get into that now because it's too much. All right, so I will put this here, zero it out. Let's add 100 grams of water. Zero that out. We're going to do another 100 grams of flour. So we're essentially just repeating what we did this morning, and it's going to give it, this is just giving it a little bit more food. And it's the last time we need to feed it before making bread. So making sourdough is kind of like a 24-hour process. Okay. There we go. Ooh, okay, we got 100 grams. Spilled a little flour, but that's okay. Try to make it as precise as you can, but it's not the end of the world. It's like a few grams over. All right. Then we mix it up just like we did before. Make sure there's no clumps or dry spots or anything like that. Smells good. It's a little bit sour, but floury. I personally love the smell. It just smells like sourdough. Now, when you're making your sourdough starter from scratch, if you don't already have one, it like goes through this process where you just add a little bit of stuff to it every day and it smells god awful, but then eventually it comes to a nice smell. And then when you keep it in your fridge, it will still smell nice. But that doesn't happen if you use a dry sourdough starter. You won't have to go through the process of the sourdough starter kind of smelling like vomit in your house. A lot of people name their sourdough starter, so ours was gonna be named Yum Yum, but then during the creation of the starter, my kids started calling it Yuck Yuck because it smelled so bad, but now it's Yum Yum Yuck Yuck. All right, so it's all mixed up. There we go. You can see it again. And so it's just gonna rise again. I'm gonna put this top on once again, that's not airtight, and let that sit. So now we're going to make what is going to be the sourdough dough. So the starter will serve as the leavener. It will serve as the yeast. It's not the actual dough for the bread. It will be used in it though. All right. So for this, we need 455 grams of flour. So put the bowl on, zero it out. I'm sure you guys know how to use a scale. I probably don't need to tell you. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Okay. Ooh, went over a little. Just 5 grams. Perfect. Ooh. Okay. That's 455 grams of flour. And now we need 315 grams of water. I just use tap water. I think that they say if your water is like more chlorinated, then use something that's filtered. But to be honest, I truly believe that any tap water is fine. I mean, it also, this bread gets cooked, so I mean it gets baked. So if there's like not toxins, but if there's like bacteria or something like that in your tap water, it will be baked at a very high temperature. All right, so zero this out and let's do 315 grams. And I will put this part of the recipe in the description as well. Okay. We got 315 grams, and now we're just gonna mix this up. Now it's like just gonna be like a scraggly mess, and that's totally fine. It's gonna stick to your hands. One way to stop dough from sticking to your hands as much is to get your hands wet. I'm just gonna use one hand though, but it will still stick to my hands, but I'm just gonna get it wet too. Just to stop it from being too bad. So I'm just mixing it like this. And this is gonna sit here. I'm not gonna add the starter to it now. We're gonna wait until dinner time and then we're gonna add them together. So it's a few more hours, but this is a good way for the dough to start absorbing the water. And salt will be added to this later at the same time when we add the starter, once we combine them. Okay. I'm actually gonna get this hand wet a little bit. I don't know if that was a good idea, but well, I think it was a good idea. Okay. So it's just like a big scraggly mess. Just combine it, make sure there's no dry dough. You can use some of the wet dough to scrape the dry spots around the edges, the stuff that's like sticking to the edges. Make sure you put your hands all the way down to the bottom where there's going to be that little pile of unmixed dough. Oh my goodness. Of unmixed flour. Okay. I like to turn the bowl as I mix. All right. Get this pan wet. Okay. Use this hand to get some of this off of this hand. Now this doesn't have to be like perfectly smooth because we'll be doing a lot of smoothing this out later. It's just getting the flour to hydrate a little bit and letting it sit for a few hours. I really should have wet my hands a few more times, but yeah, this is good for now. All right, I'm just gonna wash my hand. All right, now I'm gonna take just a kitchen cloth and I'm gonna get it wet with like lukewarm water or warm water. Just squeeze it out. Okay, and then I'm just going to put this over top of the bowl just to stop the dough from drying out. And then I'm just gonna let it sit here just for like 4 or 5 hours. So usually I do the starter around breakfast time. I feed it again at lunchtime, and then I make this part also around lunchtime, and then at dinner time I combine them, and that part will be next. Hi guys, okay, so we are now ready to put together the sourdough starter and the dough. So here's what the starter looks like. You can see that it's all those bubbles, so it's like kind of doubled in size. Smells good, smells good. And then here we have the dough part. And so, we're gonna pull out the scale again, zero it out. And first thing we are gonna do is add 20 grams of salt. Perfect. And if it's sea salt, I would add a little bit less, just because sea salt is a lot more salty than just regular salt. Oops, I gotta get my little spoonula thingy. Okay, now we're gonna add 200 grams of the sourdough starter. You can see as I'm doing it, all of the bubbles in there. All right. Okay, good. So we have 200 grams in there, and then this is what's left over. And this I'm just gonna put right back in the refrigerator for next time. And we're done with this. Okay, so this is how everything looks right now. And I'm just gonna mix it in. And I'm just gonna get my hand wet. I put a little bowl of water here to help me. So what I actually do is I reach in, I pull up, and I fold over. Then I turn the bowl, and I reach under, and I pull up, and I fold over. And I turn the bowl, and I just keep doing it. And the dough gets really smooth and kind of shiny. And this is actually, it's called slap and fold. And I don't know, this is the only type of bread that I use this technique on. That's just how I learned. And I just mix everything in. I can still feel some of the grains of salt. And I just keep turning the bowl as I do it. And it's just, you're sort of grabbing what's underneath and pulling it over. And it's sort of almost like I can scoop it out as one ball now. Like it's not like that craggly mess that it was before. And basically by feeding by taking the 200 grams of the sourdough starter and then just the flour and water and the salt, we're almost feeding the starter the entire thing of dough. And so as the starter eats, it produces gas, and it's just gonna make this whole thing leaven. And so, okay, everything's mostly mixed in. I can't feel any more little grains of salt. They've kind of dissolved. But you can see how it's kind of shiny and it all is kind of sticking together. Like once again, I can just pick it up like that. And keeping your hands wet, honestly, is a huge deal. Otherwise, this would just be one big sticky mess. Okay, good. So what I'm going to do now is cover this, and then I'm going to set my timer for 30 minutes. This becomes a mess all throughout the process. Just wipe my hands, cover it, and then when I'm done with the sourdough, I just throw it in the wash. So I set my timer for 30 minutes and then I come back. So I'm gonna set my timer now, and don't forget to put your sourdough starter in the fridge. Okay guys, it's been 30 minutes, and so we gotta do a little slap and fold. Here's how it looks right now. So I'm gonna get my hands wet in this little water bowl, and here, so you can see, I'm gonna reach under, fold, all I'm turning the bowl. And I just do this, I go around until it gets like too tight to pull up and fold. Because every time you do this, you're activating the gluten, which makes it tougher. And the gluten is sort of like, has like a glue-like quality, which traps the air bubbles inside. And so it's starting to get harder and harder to lift up and flip over without just lifting up the whole thing. So that's actually plenty enough. And I will cover it again. Sourdough is actually a lot of work. Like, it's the most work of any bread I make. So I don't know, maybe you'll do it and you'll feel like it's for you, or at least you want to try it once, or you'll be like, okay, I'm just gonna buy this from now on. But I really enjoy it, and if you're home during the day, then it works out great. All right, another 30 minutes on the timer and we'll be back. We're ready for the next slap and fold. That was actually a little bit too much water. You don't have to put your hand in the water every time. Okay. See, it's kind of like becoming this like ball that's like glossy and shiny. And I think we will do one more of these, and then we will be ready to put it in the pot where it will sit overnight. Hey guys, okay, we are back for the last slap and fold. This is how it's looking right now. So we'll just go around a couple times and tighten it up. Okay, looking pretty good. All right, now we are going to transfer this into the Dutch oven. And so I am going to put this parchment paper in here, and that just sort of prevents it from sticking. And I also like to sprinkle a little flour at the bottom. It just helps it, because sometimes the paper sticks to the bread. So, all right, now I'm gonna put some flour on the table, because I'm going to put the dough out on the table before I put it into the Dutch oven. And so I'm actually putting a lot here. I'm actually gonna scoot it over, so hopefully you can see a little better. Okay. All right, here we go. Now this part is kind of a mess, so I'm actually still gonna get my hands wet. And I just fold the dough in towards the center, and this is kind of really slippery, so I don't know, that's just gonna have to be good enough. And I put it into the Dutch oven. It's kind of a mess, that part's hard. Hold on, I'll show you in a sec. But it actually evens out pretty quickly. So it smooths itself out pretty quickly. There you go, you can see. All right, so it is like very wet and sticky, but I am going to just put the top on and I will let it sit on my counter overnight, and then we will bake it in the morning. All right, so it is the next morning, so let's have a look. It's all bubbly, which means that it's gonna rise good. I have the oven preset to 450 degrees, and I'm actually gonna bake it with the top on. And I'm gonna bake it for 35 minutes, and then I am going to take the top off and then bake it for another 10 minutes. Oh yes, and actually if you're using a Dutch oven, I would maybe just suggest to take this knob off that's on the top. It might not matter at all, but I don't know, I do it just in case. And it also gives it a little steam hole right here. All right, we're going in the oven. Okay, so it's been 35 minutes, so we need to take the top off the Dutch oven. All right. So this is how it looks, and then we're just gonna put it back in the oven for 10 minutes with the top off. It's time. The bread should be ready now. All right. Let's check it out. Here we go. Look how pretty that is. All right, so I'm gonna let it sit for like, I don't know, like 10 minutes, and then I'll take it out of here and slice it up. Okay, we're ready to take it out. Whew. This is still hot. Actually, I'm just gonna pull up on this parchment paper. Oops, here we go. Woo, hot. It smells so good. Sometimes the paper really does get stuck to it. Not too bad. All right, here is our beautiful sourdough bread. Smells so good. I got most of the paper off of it, but now let's slice it up. I don't know why I'm choosing the best corner, but I am. Okay. You can see all the bubbles in there. You can even see a little bit of steam coming off of it. You can even see a little piece of paper on here still. I already got it off. Okay. My favorite things to make with sourdough bread, there's this one avocado toast, which I'll do a video on that. But the other thing is jam with a little bit of cheddar cheese. I actually don't have cheddar cheese, but I do have jam. Some jam that I got at the farmer's market. Let me grab that. At some of the vegetable stands at the farmer's market, they also sell like fresh jam and fresh salsa. It's like some of the best jam and salsa that I've tasted. And I feel like it has a little less sugar in it or something. So good. All right, well, that's it, you guys. I'm gonna try not to eat all of this before my kids come home. Thanks for hanging out with me. If you have any questions while you're trying to make your own sourdough, I don't know why I decided to start giving this speech while I was still chewing. If you have any questions while you're making your own sourdough, feel free to put them in the comments, or I'll make a community post about it as well, where I'll put the recipe. But I wish you lots of luck, and we can do lots of different bread types that are maybe a little bit easier than this in the future. But I hope you enjoy and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.